Hey everyone, David here. Welcome to another review of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and this time it is for the episode entitled Chaos Theory, which states that when a drop of water falls onto your hand, drops to one direction, is not going to drop to the next area of your hand. Chaos theory. So in honor of Jeff Goldblum, I'm going to keep my glasses on, and not just because of that, but also because I'm just out of the loop here. But this episode pretty much wrapped up the entire Lash storyline within one episode, and keeping that sense of momentum with the second and third season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we get the rest of the team finding out about Andrew Garner in very dramatic fashion, and it delivered, for the most part, a really great episode that had an awful lot of action, a lot of thrills. It almost felt like this climactic mission that's very reminiscent of Hollywood movies, which in my opinion was a great thing. I actually it had this Black Ops type of approach when it came to taking down Lash by the team. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that led up to that big reveal, which were just a tiny bit troubling in my opinion. First off, I was delighted to see that Joey finally returns after that first episode of season 3. I mean, he's been gone this entire time, and I'm like, him appearing in this episode made me realize, what are you doing with this character? You gave him such an emphasis in that first premiere episode that for him to be gone this whole time, and now me barely realizing it, I'm like, then what's the point of this character? So when Lash kills him in that daydream sequence that Andrew has, I for a split second thought it was real because of the fact that we barely had anything to do with that character. So I feel like that was the writers just wasting him away, only then to cut back to Andrew simply just imagining the whole thing in his head, which kind of makes sense because I felt like he transformed to Lash rather too quickly, and I was like, okay, yeah, obviously it was a daydream sequence. And also it made me happy that it was just that, because prior to that sequence we saw him being able to build things with his powers, and that was very poetic for his character because he's a construction worker. So to see him have that revelation that maybe he can do these powers for good and maybe could join Daisy's team of secret warriors gives that character a new sense of potential for the remainder of the season and probably for the remainder of the series. So that'd be pretty interesting to watch. But up until that point, and the events to follow after that scene, I felt like we were just getting shades of scenes of Andrew Garner, and then in between we were cutting back to all these other things that it kind of got me a little bit scared that we weren't going to be focusing on Andrew Garner. We kept cutting back to Fitz and his investigation and trying to open up the portal, and the little stretch between the two symbols was a little too much for me. I was like, okay, that's how you're going to be able to figure out how the portal, I mean, that's just a little too coincidental, a little too out there. But beyond that, even if the emotional material behind his little story arc in this episode was handled really well, with him watching the recordings of Simmons out there, and then both of them watching the sunrise towards the end, it was handled very well, and the performances were able to solidify that. But every time we would cut to that, as good as it was, I kept wanting to cut back to the stuff with Garner because within this episode, I found that to be the most interesting part. So I felt like this stuff with Fitz and Simmons, similar to previous episodes with S.H.I.E.L.D., like I've stated many times before, and I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, could have waited for another episode. And then we had Rosalind getting kind of like an open house treatment by Daisy, giving her like a tour of the bus and what they're trying to do to contain Inhumans and to try to turn them over to the good side, so to speak, and how ACTU can maybe benefit from that, and how they have a little bit, they kind of butt heads at one point, Daisy and Rosalind, about their methods of trying to cope with the Inhumans. And that, again, that was good and all, and if you want to, I was talking to my girlfriend while I was watching the episode, if you want to, they didn't beat you over the head with it, but if you wanted to, you can take the methods about treating Inhumans, and this can also be reflected upon the X-Men series. And of course, the X-Men can't be mentioned in any kind of Marvel Studios property because Fox still has the rights. But you could take those two mediums, the X-Men franchise, and then everything that has to do with Inhumans here within this Marvel cinematic universe, and apply them to the real world. You're gonna the first thing that came to my mind about Rosalind's argument about people being their own weapon and not knowing whether or not some people are out there, and she even uses the analogy of, for every Daisy Johnson there is a Lash. It could be applied to some relevant current events happening in the world today. And one of the big ones that for some reason popped into my mind is the whole, gun law type of deal, whether or not people should own guns and that type of thing, the NRA, all that stuff. That's the first thing that came to my mind. So it makes for some interesting conversational material when it came to this argument between the ACTU's approach to handling Inhumans versus Shields. And again, that material was nice, but I felt like it was just getting in the way of the mystery behind Garner. And, well, not so much the mystery, but whether or not he's going to get caught, whether or not Shield's going to find out within this episode. But sure enough, they do. Melinda, after getting that tip from Von Strucker, who apparently did not die in the last episode, he just went into a coma. So maybe he could be brought back, and maybe Von Strucker could actually have some kind of important role within the MCU, because his father got killed off screen in a very pathetic way in Age of Ultron. So I'm hoping that maybe they don't do the same thing with this kid, and he becomes a very integral part to the plot, especially considering that ending stinger that we get at the very end of this episode, which I'll talk about in a second. But after getting that hint that maybe Garner is Lash, May does a little investigation of her own, pulls flight records, takes out medical bills of Garner, and puts things together and goes after him to confront him firsthand. And once this happens is where the rest of the episode picks up momentum, and it all focuses on Garner, and that really pleased me, because like I said, for a second there I felt like it was going to do that thing where we kept jumping back and forth between plot lines, and only like the last 10 minutes or so I'm going to have to do with Garner. But honestly, it was like the final half of the second half of the episode had all to do with Garner and with the team finding out. My only little issue would be that Lincoln. I was about to say Andrew Lincoln, the guy from The Walking Dead, Rick from The Walking Dead. I'm getting my shows mixed up here, but Lincoln, Sparkplug, as he's been kind of nicknamed here and there, mainly from, I believe, Mac was the one who dropped the comic book nickname there. He actually approaches Mac, speaking of which, and says, hey, I have a hunch that maybe somebody within S.H.I.E.L.D. is Lash in disguise. And Mac is the one that's able to put two and two together and say Garner is Lash, and goes to Coulson and Rosalind and Daisy with this information, and that's where they develop this kind of Black Ops type of mission to take down Lash, to the point where even the ACTU, under Rosalind's direction, decides to cooperate with Coulson and says, hey, this is Coulson's op, we're going to do whatever he says. And that was a very cool, men and women on a mission to try to take down Lash, and cutting back and forth between Coulson, May, and Garner within the same room, and then cutting back to to Daisy, Lincoln, and Mac all getting into positions. It felt almost like a Nolan movie. It felt like a Christopher Nolan movie, where they like try to take down somebody or not necessarily Nolan, but just like some kind of police type thriller, and they handled it very well. But going back to my initial issue would be that Lincoln literally comes out of nowhere and says, hey, I have this hunch, and things just click a little too easily. I was hoping for them to take their time in revealing, or not so much revealing Garner, but revealing Garner to S.H.I.E.L.D. and S.H.I.E.L.D. catching on and being like, oh my god, I think it is Garner. They kind of handled that just a little too quickly. I felt like they found out just almost immediately, and they decided to go on Mac's word. Not to say that they wouldn't believe him, but I was just expecting them to kind of take more time absorbing the idea that Garner was this monster this whole time, rather than to just go off of on literally just a hunch and say, okay, turn this plane around. They literally just turn the plane around and go directly towards May and Garner's location. And like I said, I understand that things do make sense, like especially when Coulson says that that May and Garner have been gone for, they've been reporting missing for some time now, so things mesh easily. But still, I was hoping for some kind of resonation within the team to figure out, like, oh my god, Garner really in fact is Lash. And instead I know that they needed to meet that runtime, but still I was glad that they handled it within the episode, because like I said, the momentum keeps going, and it became like a thrill ride having this team go into this mission, into this complex, to take down Lash. But what really sold this entire section of the episode was May's involvement and her reaction to the whole ordeal about her ex-husband being this monster. And I'll admit, I did find the revelation as to why Lash was going after humans just a little bit lacking. Basically, he was going through Jiaying's files, and of course Jiaying, being the Magneto type of character that she was, she rigged some of her materials to kill whoever went into them. But apparently Andrew turned out to be an Inhuman himself. he became these subjects that he was studying this whole entire time, which is called irony. And because of that, the mist did not kill him, but instead unlocked like a Hulk type of monster within him that apparently he cannot control. It's some kind of instinct that comes out of him. And the reason why it's lacking is because I believe me as well as others were hoping for some kind of deep-rooted motivation behind him wanting Inhumans to go away. I mean, he did have that moment where he said Lincoln had a dark side and that's why he wanted to kill him. But then there were other Inhumans that weren't really that like bad. I mean, Joey, in fact, he was flat out telling him like, "Hey, I want to do good. I can be a weapon for Daisy's team." And just automatically, Andrew's like, a dangerous weapon, you know, and approaching him really quickly. And don't get me wrong, that scene was rather intense as he got closer and closer to him. I'm like, dude, I like Joey. I don't want him to get killed off. So when he got killed, I was like, oh man, they're gonna do his character like that. So I was relieved to see that it was just a thing in his head. But I was just hoping for something different rather than a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of vibe coming from Andrew and his Lash alter ego. But what really redeemed that segment of the episode was May's reaction, because May has always been this stoic character that had a very direct objective to do. You know, she was very serious. She would always be serious and collected and firm. So whenever there's an episode that has her change her expression and you see a tiny little glimmer of sadness on her face, it's effective as hell. Going back to that episode that's actually mentioned in this episode, that time where that we flash back to what happened in that country, Baran, whatever it was called, but had to do with that little girl who turned out to be an Inhuman and was controlling all these people, and that's the event that kind of traumatized May, created a rift between her and Andrew, and put her in a desk job over at S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time. It's moments like that that Ming-Na Wen really shines as an actress and makes us like the character even more, and makes us root for her, and makes her become more than just this character with like a blank face, as opposed to season 1. Remember in season 1, I was looking at May and I'm like, can she smile? Can she emote? She has come a long way. Much like other characters in S.H.I.E.L.D., she has come a long way since then. And her reaction to this entire situation and how it concludes with him being put in stasis by ACTU, it was really effective and really delivered really well by Ming-Na Wen. But before the episode concludes, we get a scene between Ward and the guy over from Hydra who handed over Strucker over to Ward, and whose name, it's funny because the character's name has never really gelled with me, but the actor's name does. You want to know what this guy's, the actor's name is? Powers Booth. I'm fairly certain that's not his real name, but it's a very damn cool name, which is why I felt like I can easily remember the actor's name over his character's name. What I do remember is that he was actually in the first Avengers movie. He was one of those chairmen that Nick Fury would often talk to whenever he would need some consulting. You know, those scenes where they were considering dropping a nuclear weapon or whatever, and Fury's like, I'm not going to do that. He's talking to all those people that are in the shadows. He was one of them. And even though he as well as people behind S.H.I.E.L.D., the writers or whatever, have denied that his character here is the same one as Avengers, it wouldn't make sense. And by this time, I think we've accepted the fact that they're probably the same exact character. He's reprising the same exact character because we got to keep in mind that this was S.H.I.E.L.D. prior to the Winter Soldier twist. So chances are he was within Hydra at that time. So it would make sense. They might as well just admit it. But anyways, we got the two of them talking and potentially working out some kind of cooperation, some kind of agreement to maybe help each other out. But in the middle of this conversation, we get not only the stance of Ward wanting to go after Coulson, which is kind of, we come to expect, but then we get him get this guy getting a phone call, and it is here where we get the revelation that Rosalind is actually working for this guy. So ACTU was just too good to be true. Her cooperation with Coulson was too good to be true as well. And this just hurts because not only in this episode do we see her actually being grateful to Daisy for Daisy rescuing Rosalind, but she slept with Coulson. Coulson and Rosalind finally hooked up. I was shipping the two of them. They finally got together. So her turnaround, the revelation of her working with the enemy was kind of hurtful because I was getting to like this character only to get this. So I'm definitely interested to see how this plays out next week after watching that preview. I'm trying my best not to watch previews, but they happen during the end credits, so I'm like, oh, definitely excited to see how this plays out. So, Chaos Theory. I love doing Jeff Goldblum. I love it. I'm pretty sure everybody does. Jeff Goldblum is the new Christopher Walken. I'll tell you that right now. But Chaos Theory did have a, I don't want to say an iffy start, but a slightly unfocused start. But that still had plenty of good material in it. But as soon as May and Garner got together and secrets started to get spilled, that's where the episode gained momentum and it became a thrill ride with this monster just lurking within this human that is heavily connected to one of the characters that we have come to like ever since the first season. And that's where I felt like S.H.I.E.L.D. was at its best. There were some things that were kind of disappointing, like his motivation, like his background. I was hoping for something a little bit better than him just being exposed to the mist. And I do think that Lincoln coming out of nowhere, and deciding to stick around was just a little bit too much out of left field. But besides those quirks within the writing, I felt like this was a rather compelling episode. So I give Chaos Theory a high 8 out of 10. So let me know what you guys thought of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. What do you think is going to happen between the ACTU and Coulson? And do you think that their newfound relationship is going to last after the potential shoe that is going to drop in next week's episode? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.